The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show. I am back. I'm back on the Yaron Brook Show, and I am not, obviously not practiced enough to unmute the mic. So there you go. I'm here for a while. I'll be here for the next 5-6 weeks. So we should be on a regular schedule before I go to Europe. And then we'll be on a regular schedule from Europe, but that'll be less regular than this. And yeah, missed you guys. Hope you missed me. And we're going to be doing a bunch of shows, probably for the next week or so, 7 shows a week. We'll be doing a show every day, including tomorrow. To be determined. I'll let you know time and everything else. All right, let's jump in. We're going to start with the news, some catch-up news from the week, and then we'll go for a slightly more in-depth discussion of an essay by Niall Fergusson, titled "We're All Soviets Now." We're all Soviets now. All right. So let's see. Columbia University. So we're all familiar with the, with what happened in Columbia, basically the taking over of the campus by demonstrators, and just the encampment, the anti-Semitic slurs, the taking over of a building. It was pretty disastrous. Ultimately, this was all dealt with by NYPD. But there was a lot of talk at the time. Look, this isn't really anti-Semitism. Don't exaggerate. They're just anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist, not anti-Semitic, and the Jewish kids weren't harassed at all. Nowhere, it didn't happen. Anyway, there was Columbia University established a anti-Semitism, what is it? A committee to study what was going on their campus. Whenever you find a problem, establish a task force. So we have a task force at Columbia University. Some of their findings, one professor who was reading out the names of students before an exam, encountered a Jewish-sounding surname. And asked the students to explain their views on the Israeli government's action in Gaza, like in front of everybody, just before sitting for an exam. Relevance? I don't think the exam was an oral exam on the situation in the Gaza Strip, right? Now, this is a professor. One of the things notable from the report issued by this task force is how much of the anti-Semitism, the locus of it, the origin of it, just the regular perpetuation of it was done by faculty members, not by students necessarily, also students, but primarily by faculty members. Another professor told his class to avoid reading mainstream media. That sounds familiar, right? It sounds like a number of people on our chat and generally in our culture, stop reading mainstream media. He declared that you should not read mainstream media because it was owned by Jews. It's a good enough reason not to read mainstream media. A third revealed that a student complained about an offensive comment regarding Jews by publicly displaying the email to fellow students. A professor showed the email to all the students about one of these complaining Jews who's complaining about anti-Semitism and so on. Professors encourage students to participate in pro-Palestinian protests. So they urge their students to go out and demonstrate. They encourage them to participate in the Gaza Solidarity encampment. And they gave them, and this is just unbelievable, they gave them extra credit if they participated in the encampment. And some of them actually conducted classes in the encampment. Jewish students who might have been wearing a high, one of those, or some kind of Jewish symbol, any kind of Jewish symbol, had these ripped off of them. Many Jewish students were pushed out of student clubs that they had been part of because they wouldn't make like loyalty oaths by making statements against the very existence of the state of Israel. It turns out that this task force, the people running the task force, the people involved, were actually quite surprised by how extensive the anti-Semitism was at Columbia University, how bad it was, how offensive it was. It's not clear what Columbia is going to do about this. I think mainly they're going to have sensitivity training. They're going to redefine anti-Semitism. So the solution I think that Columbia is going to come up with, and I think this is true of most universities, is to double down on identity politics. So we all know, and it's been established really in our curriculum, right, that you have to be sensitive when dealing with blacks and Hispanics and gays and trans and all these other things. Well, now we're going to add another group. We're going to add this other group called Jews, and to the list to which you need to be sensitive. So instead of realizing that at the end of the day, the cause of the anti-Semitism is identity politics, the cause of the anti-Semitism is identitarianism in all its various forms, including the various sensitivity training seminars, programs, and so on. Instead of realizing that the fundamental cause of the anti-Semitism on American campuses is the curriculum being taught by the professors, not even the professors being anti-Semitic. The curriculum, the actual content of what is being taught at these universities, from anti-colonialism to what was it called? Orientalism, which was Edward Said, who is, of course, a renowned professor at Columbia University, to intersectionality, to all the variety of what has come to be called woke. All of this identitarian, which I think is the accurate description of it, identitarian areas of study, they are the cause of anti-Semitism. They are the cause of increased racism across the board. And instead of dealing with that, they will put a Band-Aid on the problem, and that Band-Aid will be called more sensitivity training. One of the co-chairs of this committee said, quote, "Only when we talk to the students did we realize how serious the problem is. Unfortunately, there are still many faculty members who do not believe that there is anti-Semitism on campus, and some claim that anti-Semitism is being weaponized to protect pro-Israel views. We can put it this way. Have there been anti-Semitic incidents? Yes, absolutely. Are there anti-Semitic faculty and students? Yes, there are some. Are all of them anti-Semitic? Probably not. But you see, they're still avoiding the cause. They're still ignoring the actual source of the problem. This is going to be an ongoing story as these various universities and campuses deal with this. We're in summer break right now, so this will probably be a story on a very low flame for a while. We won't get a lot of news on this. But I do expect that with the new school year, and who knows what is going to be going on in the Middle East with the new school year, you can expect an increase in stories relating to this, potentially new demonstrations and new revelations about the extent to which to which anti-Semitism, anti-Israeli sentiment, as if it's okay to be anti-Israeli. That's an identity group. It's okay to be anti. But it's not okay to be anti-Semitic. That's an identity group that it's not okay to be. I mean, this is the problem with identitarian politics. One of the notions that the committee actually dealt with is the fact that if you'd gone around campus, saying that if we don't want BLM supporters here. Imagine if you'd gone around campus saying we don't want BLM supporters here, you would be immediately suspended. You'd be immediately stopped. But the idea that we don't want Zionists here, that's okay. No problem with that. That is something we can shut down. But anyway, that is the latest out of Columbia University. Talking about anti-Semites, I figure we would do, my two favorite people on the right these days is Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. So I figure let's watch a little bit of Candace Owens. Well, first, let me just make the connection with Israel, and then we'll go on to a different topic with Candace Owens. But Candace Owens interviewed a very friendly interview, an almost a completely appeasing, groveling, mutual respect, mutual love interview with Brianna Joy Gray. Brianna Joy Gray, if you remember, we talked about we talked about her. She was the one who did the debate with Kissen and then got into a whole pissing match with him. She's the one that expressed these horrific anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic views, and was ultimately, because of the views she had expressed, the horror, she was fired by The Hill. She's also the former press secretary for Bernie Sanders, so she's from the radical left. Candace Owens is from the extreme right, so we've got two of these extremes, and yet they have found that they are a mutual admiration society when it comes to hatred of Israel and anti-Semitic views. And I'm not going to show you clips of that. It's pretty disgusting. But you can watch the interview Candace Owens did with Brianna Joy Gray. It's on YouTube on Candace Owens' new channel now that she's left the Daily Wire and she's all independent. She has a new show which is garnering massive subscriptions. So she's doing very, very well. Let me see. She has got, yeah, that's not it. All right. Anyway, she's, let me just see how many subscribers does Candace Owens now have? I mean, probably millions, right? Taking a second to load. Yep, 1.87 million subscribers. So Candace Owens now has an audience, a massive audience to spout her nonsense. She has, this interview with Brianna. Had massive numbers of views. Candace Owens is very popular. Remember, these are subscribers. This channel only came into being very recently. So she got 1.8 just like that. And this interview from 7 days ago, it's a week old, 523,000 views. So Candace is huge and just continues to spout kind of the worst kind of disgusting nonsense and finding common cause with the far left. But don't forget that Candace should be part of our umbrella. She hates trans. On cultural issues, which are the only important issues in the world, she hates the left, and therefore she should be part of our umbrella. And the fact that she agrees with the far left on things like Jews in Israel, that's okay, because that's not a cultural issue. She hates trans, and that's the only issue that matters. Anyway, here's Candace. Here's Candace, who is, if she is fringe, then the fringes on the right is very, very, very big. Here's Candace on World War II. Let's see. I can click on that, and there we go. There's Candace. I know. You all wanted to see Candace Owens. Here's Candace Owens on World War II, showing her ignorance and stupidity wrapped all together.
America first. In the 1930s, there was another America first movement, sort of isolationist movement, saying we mustn't go to war in Europe again after the First World War. Do you think that those America first supporters then were right? Do you think that America shouldn't have gone into that Second World War?
Yeah, and that is a radical statement.
Shouldn't have gone into World War II. I mean, she could have had a nuanced response, right? You could say something like, well, I mean, I think that we should have not gone in as long as we weren't attacked, and we should have delayed, and we should have, not rushed into war. And certainly, World War I was a mistake. But no, World War II was a mistake. We should have never gone in. And then she goes off, of course, on what she really cares about and what they all care about on the social issues. That's all that matters. All that matters are social issues. So let's hear more from Candace Owens.
People don't know how to deal with that because we've all been so brainwashed by the school system to believe that, well, look how great things are. Let me ask you.
So we've been brainwashed by the school system about how great things are. There's a lot you could unpack there. I'm not sure I want to, but brainwashed by the school system. Yeah, there's a lot of brainwashing by the school system. I'm not sure we'd agree on which direction that brainwashing goes. And great things are in many respects really pretty great. We'll get to how horrible they are in a minute when we talk about now Fergusson. And but what does this got to do with World War II? I guess the educational system convinces us that World War II is a good war. We should have gone to it. And that's the problem with our educational system. I mean, there are a lot of problems. I'm not sure that's the problem. But anyway.
About your country, do you think that your country has become greater since? Has our country become greater since? Absolutely not.
So has the United States become greater since entering World War II? The United States entered World War II in the midst of a Great Depression. The United States entered World War II with about as left-wing, socialist admiring president as probably we've ever had, FDR. The United States entered World War II after a decade of some of the largest expansions of government programs, largest expansion of government agencies, role of government in all of American history. The United States entered World War II really a little before World War II with very, very high unemployment and with a significant number of Americans in deep poverty. So yeah, I think we're better off today than we were before we entered World War II. Now, it's true. It's absolutely true. The gays couldn't marry before World War II, so on that count. And there was no trans issue before World War II, so maybe that's a big issue. We'll get to that in a minute. And anybody else? The South, blacks, Candace's own probably ancestors were still under Jim Crow laws, when we entered World War II. So you could argue that, yeah, things were much better then. So America has become a lot less great, right? So what exactly? In what way are we not as great? One thing if she'd said, a couple of decades before that, but again, for whom was it more great back then? We were certainly economically freer, but socially we were a lot less free. We're much freer today socially than we were back then. Life for many, many, many Americans, including women, by the way, is much better now than it was back then. So this is the kind of standard conservative nonsense about how wonderful the past was, how amazing the past was, how phenomenal the past was. If only we hadn't gone to World War II, things would be fantastic today. What?
This whole idea of international liberalism. Now it's not just about your problems, it's about solving the world's problems. Let's make sure that in Pakistan there's a trans flag waving.
What does a trans flag in Pakistan have anything to do with entering World War II after Pearl Harbor was attacked? Huh? I mean, that's where their mind goes. Two issues, their mind goes all the time, right? Every single time. Their mind goes to 1, trans, 2, immigration. I mean, 1.87 million people subscribe to her channel. This particular interview was on GB News, so it didn't get a lot of views, but everything else she does gets hundreds of thousands of views. She is a major intellectual on the right. Intellectual, God, there's a stretch for you.
No, I actually, if Pakistan does not want to wave a trans flag, I don't even want to wave a trans flag, but why is this my business? And they're constantly trying to pollute you to make you think that it is your business. No, I actually am comfortable if that's going to be the newest smear that I have to wear, that we're isolationists. Good. I want to be concerned with just America's problems.
Note how she brings in Pakistan and a trans flag when answering a question on World War II. She's good. You got to say she's good. She takes a question on World War II and gets the trans issue like that, and people out there are probably cheering her on. Wow, this is exciting because she got to the issue that they really care about. I mean, Scott is about to subscribe to Candace Owens' channel any moment now.
As soon as those get resolved, I'm happy to peek up our head and
Probably
say, oh, well, you know what,
already.
there are friends over there in the UK. Let's see how they're doing and if we can help them. But America first.
But Japan did attack Pearl Harbor, so presumably you would have reacted to that.
Her.
Yeah, I mean, yes, look at it. I think, of course, if you're ever talking about a threat in terms of your nation being attacked, you should always have an equal response.
You should always have an equal response. So Japan attacked, and you should always have an equal response. They destroyed the Pacific Fleet. So what do? We destroyed their Pacific Fleet. What is an equal response? We shouldn't go to war. No World War II. And, it's not mentioned later on that maybe Hitler declared war on the United States. I guess we should have done an equal, I don't know. This is so irrational and stupid that it really is hard to think through.
But at the moment,
so that war was just.
Well, a response was just, right?
A response was just.
Does the response necessarily dictate a world war? These are questions that should be relegated, I think, to an academic discussion. These would be interesting academic discussions. I'd love to get a bunch of people and to play out those scenarios. What if we had just responded to Japan and dealt with the threat? I haven't had the time to sit down and think about it, and I definitely don't want to do that on the fly and get that wrong. But it would be a very interesting discussion to think about other options in terms of responding to things. Tucker Carlson a couple of weeks ago said that he wouldn't have dropped a nuke, and the world went, "What are you talking about?"
Yep, Tucker Carlson is on her side. Also another fringe figure, I guess. Tucker Carlson, even bigger than Candace. No, he shouldn't have dropped an H-bomb. I mean, what is the difference between the left and the right? Exactly? Anybody? Somebody? Difference between them?
And I said, no, he's absolutely correct. The war was essentially over. Japan was already negotiating their surrender. They had been literally on the defense for 2 years.
Now she's a historian. She doesn't have an answer to what would be an alternative response to Pearl Harbor, but now she's an historian who knows exactly what was going on and why a nuke was necessary or unnecessary.
There was no reason that we needed to drop that bomb on a Catholic church, no less.
You see how she gets to her talking points, right? One of her big talking points over the last few months has been the oppression of Christians all over the world. And now it turns out, you didn't know this, I didn't know this, but the whole point of dropping the nuke, I think it was in Hiroshima, the whole point of dropping the nuke was to destroy a Catholic church. Not a Protestant church, because she's converted to Catholicism, a Catholic church. So that is the actual point of the whole Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was to destroy another church, to oppress the Japanese Christians. Indeed, we were probably in it. Truman was probably in league with the emperor to destroy Christianity in Japan and to bring back a Japanese Shinto greatness.
In Nagasaki, in order to end the war.
Oh,
That's
Nagasaki,
garbage that you're being taught in your school system, and is making it so that you don't think critically and that you don't question government initiatives when they say rah, 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 let's go to war. Let's have the courage to talk about what the military-industrial complex is and whether or not it's serving us. Because let me tell you something. If we're sending trillions of dollars...
trillions of dollars. The numbers are pretty amazing. Trillions of dollars. I wonder who got the trillions of dollars. I didn't.
Trillions of dollars overseas, and they're taking money from us every second of the day to fight wars, and you're telling me that we don't even have a secure border? That's fraud.
See how she got to that? Isn't that amazing? She got the trans issue before. Now she's going for the other hot button issue, immigration. Secure borders. We're sending trillions overseas who don't have secure borders. We could build one amazing wall. I mean, a really amazing wall with trillions of dollars. An unbelievably amazing wall. I mean, a really tall wall and a really deep wall and a really slippery wall that you can't climb. I mean, really, trillions of dollars would build a great wall.
Fraud. I don't care which way they try to spin it. I don't care how many sad stories they try to tell us. That is absolute fraud being enacted upon the American people.
To many Americans, saying that we shouldn't go to war because of Pearl Harbor sounds like weakness or maybe even cowardice. Do you know? How do you
Oops.
respond to that?
War is not responding, right? I'm not saying that there should always be an equal response to make sure that you are, in fact, secure.
What the hell
anytime
is
you are
that?
attacked.
What is an equal response?
To call that cowardice, at the very same time, saying that we have a porous border and we should do nothing. No, that's cowardice. This is way worse. What's happening right now in our country right now is way worse, okay? We have a bunch of people coming in. We don't know who they are. They're coming everywhere, from Kazakhstan, from China.
Yeah, I know.
We have men that are traveling
bullshit.
alone.
Right. That's Candace Owens, guys. Just to keep you updated on who's who in the world out there. That is Candace at her best, I think. Let me just flip this over. And yeah, this is the new right. All right. Just so you don't feel like I don't know. I'm going to skip this. I'll just say there was a big rally. It wasn't that big if you look at the audience size. It wasn't that big, but an anti-Semitic cool guy, Nick Fuentes, Suleiman Ahmed, Lucas Gage, Jack Seals, David Duke. You remember David Duke, the old KKK grand wizard? Had a big rally on the Jewish question. Wasn't that big. It was in Detroit. It was pretty pathetic. And yeah, I mean, the anti-Semites are feeling more emboldened right now to go out and do stuff, engage and form coalitions and form a big tent and argue against everybody than really ever before. I mean, it is quite astounding. It is quite astounding how emboldened they are right now to be out there, and I really don't see people on the right going out there and criticizing them and arguing against them. Quite the contrary, it seems more and more that people on the more moderate right or the more centrist right are, well, not more. At least the MAGA crowd seems to be clearly trying to attract these people and trying to cooperate with them. So the right is hopeless, and the left is hopeless. And until you accept that, you don't have any. You're not connected to reality, the political reality of America, if you don't recognize how hopeless the right is and how hopeless the left is, how the extent to which politics in America has deteriorated dramatically and deteriorated to a point where I think most Americans don't know how to categorize themselves anymore and don't have a proper home because the two sides, call them sides, becomes so pathetic. All right, let's see. This is a funny story. You remember the Gaza Pier? Remember the pier? We talked about this quite a bit. We talked about when they built it and how pathetic that was, all to deliver aid to the to Hamas. The United States investing $230 million to build a pier so that Hamas could then steal the aid that was being delivered to the Palestinians, all in the name of altruism, all in the name of sacrifice, American treasure, and lives for the sake of really the enemy, if you understand it properly. Anyway, you remember there was a storm, like a spring storm, and the pier fell apart. So then they reassembled it at the cost of another, I think, $25 million, and they assembled it again, and it was starting to run again. And then, unexpectedly, there was weather in the Mediterranean. Unanticipated weather, we are told. I don't know. Again, as somebody who knows the Mediterranean a little bit, I grew up on the shores of the Mediterranean, at least a portion of my childhood. Summer Mediterranean is pretty predictable. It's pretty much the same thing every year. There's nothing unusual about this year's Mediterranean. There are strong waves in the Mediterranean in the summer. I told you this months ago. July, August, it gets pretty bad. May, flat, like a lake. That's when the thing fell apart. They must have had abnormal. But then summer is just strong waves, but they're not that strong. It's not the Pacific. It's not Hawaii. You can't really surf. You can body surf. You don't really do big surfing in the Mediterranean. And yet, the United States Navy, in its glory, has decided to dismantle the pier and to take it home. They've decided that given the weather in the Mediterranean, it was unfeasible to have this pier delivering aid to the enemy. They had a vice admiral go out and issued a press thing about solely it's all because of unanticipated weather. It's truly shocking. Mightiest military force in human history cannot build a pier, cannot build a floating pier on one of the least powerful seas in the world. This is not the North Atlantic. What would happen if this Navy had to deliver, goods to the UK, traveling over the North Atlantic in winter with submarines trying to hunt them down? That was a Navy. Now, can't build a pier because the Mediterranean is too stormy. Too stormy. This is summer. No hurricanes. Anyway, depressing as hell that this is the state of naval operations. Depressing that they ever built it. I'm glad it's gone. Let's be clear. I'm glad it's gone. But it's sad that they can't pull it off. Imagine if this pier was necessary to deliver aid to soldiers who had just engaged in an amphibious landing on some distant shore. And this was necessary in order to get them all the aid that they needed and to get equipment and get tanks and get, that would be horrible. The fact that the U.S. Navy cannot build such a facility is just so, it's so defeatist. All right, election. We've got a bunch of really big elections, coming up. What is it, in a week, over the next 2 weeks, really. We've got the first round, the second round of the French elections on June 30th and July 7th. And we've got the UK elections on, well, not the UK. Is it the whole of UK, just Britain? Anyway, on July 4th, we've got an election in Great Britain. Which is probably going to bring the Labour Party to power. Anyway, the French election is more interesting. It's more interesting because, for one, it really does appear that Marine Le Pen's national rally, the right-wing party, is going to win. And that'll be a first in French politics, and it will bring to the foray a 20-year-old protege of Marie Le Pen's, Jordan Bardella, is two L's. How do you pronounce two L's in French? In Spanish, it's ya, but I think in French it's la. So Bardella, who's 28 years old, and this will be the first time kind of the right, the solid, you could say far right, has won an election in France. The other, so that is kind of something we expected, but what is surprising coming out of the polls is that the second place political party is not Francois Macron's centrist political party. It's not Macron's kind of center-left, center-right party. It is indeed the far left. That's what I told you. It's all about the far left and the far right, and they're not that different, which is the New Popular Front. The New Popular Front is a combination of communists and socialists and Greens, and a party called Unsubmissive France. Unsubmissive France. That's an interesting one. Now, it does seem like this far left party is going to have a battle over who is going to lead it between Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is pretty far to the left, and a former socialist president of France, François Hollande, who was more of a center-left candidate. So it's going to be really interesting. So we've got a far right and a far left political parties, and Macron's centrist alliance only is like third place with less than 20% of the vote. So it does look like we are going to have potentially a hung parliament where you might get a third, let's say maybe just over a third of the far right, and then maybe something like 25%, actually 30%, closer to 30% of the far left, and then a 20% in the center. And the center committed not to forming an alliance with the far right and not to forming an alliance with the far left. And how do you form a coalition? Remember, France requires a coalition government in order to figure this out. And it truly is. It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out. It also will be interesting to see how Macron deals with all of this. I mean, it might turn out to be his biggest mistake to have these elections. Now, let's say a few words about Macron. Macron is very much a centrist, very pro-Europe, very pro-France having a leadership position in the European Union. But Macron has also done some really good things. I'd say primarily the things that he has done well are his pension reform and his labor reform. France, which has a very inflexible labor market and as a consequence has always had high unemployment, because of Macron has a slightly more flexible labor market. And Macron fought the streets, really, fought labor unions in order to raise the retirement age from 60 to 64. Now that's an important reform. A 60-year-old retirement age basically bankrupts the French state. The French state goes bust. So the fact that Macron managed to get it up to 64 from a fiscal perspective is crucial for kind of the future of a French government. What is interesting is that both the far left and the far right, want to undo the better things of Macron's agenda, of his past agenda. Both want to lower the retirement age back to 60. Both want to undo the labor reforms that he engaged in. And that they share, and they might form a coalition just to do that. They also both share a desire to spend a lot of money on slightly different things. Obviously, the socialists want much more redistribution of wealth. But the right does not object to redistribution of wealth. The right offers nothing in terms of shrinking government or even lowering regulations. Again, it wants to undo the liberalization of the labor market and increase regulations on labor markets. So what you have here is, again, a political alliance where both the left and the right are share a desire to spend and to undo whatever good Macron actually has done. Now, I'm not sure what happens to Macron. Now, he doesn't have to quit. He is only up for re-election in 2017, but with a political party that only gets 20%, how does he govern? How does he get any of his agenda passed? He really can't. Can he veto? To what extent can he veto whatever a right-wing government or a left-wing government passes, or a coalition between the two? I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with French politics. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. Will Macron's party be forced basically into coalition with Marine Le Pen, with Marine Le Pen's political party being the lead? Will he go for that? Will he accept that? Will people defect from his party and join the right in order to allow the right to form a majority government that'll govern France? In that case, how does it govern, given the president doesn't agree with them? How does that all work? So that is all to be determined. The business community in France, of course, is worried about both the hard right and the hard left. But it really is much more concerned about the hard left, as you'd expect. The hard left is definitely much more antagonistic to big business, is going to be much more disruptive to big business. So the denunciation of the hard right, which they've always done in kind of a very, very kind of hard language, this time has been much more subdued. And they are much more inclined. They're much more inclined to criticize the hard left because of the hard left's, again, explicit big business, anti-big business agenda. So that's one to watch. We got a week before the first round, and then another week for the second round of these elections. I guess what they have is you can have a lot of people running in the first round, and then if nobody gets 50%, it's like in all these districts, right? And this is the lower house of the French Parliament. And then the top two vote getters have a runoff election a week later to determine who gets determined. So part of this is who are the top two, and that will be determined also by who else is running. And there's a lot of strategies here, a lot of coalition members, or a lot of parties that are affiliated with other parties are withdrawing their candidates so that anyway, a lot of strategizing going on. I'm not going to get into it, but it's going to be interesting to see a week from now who is left standing. Who is left standing? Oh, Edmund just reminded me of a piece of news from the Trump administration. Did I talk about this on the show? I can't remember now. But this was quite entertaining and funny and ridiculous and stupid. Anyway, Donald Trump went into conference with the congressional Republicans last week, and he came out of it floating this idea of doing away with the income tax and replacing it with tariffs. Now, this is so economically stupid that all you can do is laugh, right? Now, I'm the first guy who wants to get rid of the income tax, particularly if you repeal, what do you call it, the 19th Amendment, which allowed for an income tax. That would be the right way to go. But replacing it with tariffs is about the dumbest idea in human history when it comes to economics. It's not dumb. It just shows a complete and utter 100% ignorance of economics, right? And so what does that mean? It would mean, I think somebody did the calculation, 136% tariffs on all goods coming in. Now, what would happen if 136% tariffs are placed on all the goods coming in? What would actually happen? Well, what would happen is people would buy less of those goods because they would all be more than double the price. Indeed, people would buy very few of those goods. So what would happen to imports? They would plummet. So the amount of imports would go down dramatically. And what would happen, therefore, to tax revenue? It would plummet because people wouldn't be buying imported goods because they'd be too expensive. I mean, this is just how the market works. American goods would go up in price because why not? The competition is at 136%, so they'd go up in price. Our cost of living overall would rise, right? But imports would shrink dramatically. Now, this is assuming the dollar doesn't plummet, and currencies don't shift around to compensate for this. And revenue from tariffs would actually go down close to zero, which would kind of defeat the whole purpose of raising revenue that way. And if you think that's a good idea, that we shrink revenue to zero and just borrow all the money we spend without having any plan to shrink spending, then you're basically, together with Bernie Sanders, part of the MMT movement that just thinks you can print money and there's no problem, which is what borrowing money at those scales would entail. It just entail printing a lot of money. And that has consequences. The consequences are called, wait a minute, that is called, inflation. That's what it's called. Anyway, again, one of the dumbest ideas in human history. That's Donald Trump just on an average day doing economics. God. You'd think he'd have some people surrounding him that would tell him, this is a really bad idea. Now, of course, it's not a bad idea. And this is the thing about Donald Trump that matters. It's not about this working or not working. It's about whether this increases his electability or not. And the fact is that the American people today are so ignorant of economics that it could. I mean, the evil is those imports. Imports are bad. Andrew Traeger says, Trump is no von Mises. Oh, God. Andrew, really? I mean, Trump is no Paul Krugman. Never mind von Mises. He doesn't even rise to the Paul Krugman level, which is kind of, past economist, junior economist, never mind a von Mises level. All this is about is getting him elected. And that means demonizing imports and demonizing the income tax. And Americans are so ignorant that might actually get him elected. They might actually support something like this. Anyway, so we said something bad about Trump, so let's say something bad about Biden. So you remember Biden administration has all these industrial planning things. We talked about the fact that there's $42.45 billion that Congress has voted in to deploy high-speed, to deploy, 42.45 to deploy for electric charging stations, and they managed to build 7. Well, they also have $40 billion to deploy for high-speed internet for millions of Americans, right? Because the market is not working, and the internet's not getting, high-speed internet is not getting to the right places. So the government is going to step in and going to deploy, high-speed internet for millions of people. Guess how many people have been connected as part of this plan? This massive plan to get internet into the homes of people. Exactly 0. Not a single human being has gotten an internet connection. It turns out this is kind of a plan that's supposed to grant the states money if they do this, and the Biden administration has imposed all these rules for the states to get the money. They include climate change mandates, DEI requirements, union hiring preferences, all this stuff. And even the states that want to do this can't get through all of that. And then there's a bunch of states that are saying, keep the money, we don't need it. Of course, there is no problem of high-speed internet access. Everybody can have it. There's plenty of different competing ways in which we can get high-speed internet pretty much anywhere. And if you're really in the middle of nowhere, there's always Starlink, which is now available commercially, and anybody can buy it. This is the kind of industrial planning nonsense that the Biden administration has engaged in spades and done a pretty pathetic job at it. All right, let's do a couple of positive ones. Pretty stunning that there is anything positive going on, but this is one Congress actually did. On the positive side, Congress actually passed a bill by a vote of 88-2. And this is, I'm always scared when bills pass 88-2. I don't know, there must be something horrible in there. Anyway, the only senators who voted against this were Ed Markey from Massachusetts, and Bernie Sanders. So the two most leftist, economically leftist senators in the Senate voted against it. So maybe there's some good stuff in this. Anyway, this is a bill that would actually accelerate the building of nuclear power plants. The bill streamlines permit processes. It cuts costs for developers. It encourages the opening, it encourages the development and opening of small modular nuclear reactors. It's, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what impact this have. I don't know if this has passed the House yet, but it passed the Senate 88-2, so it's likely to pass the House as well. And with that kind of margin, that's veto-proof. So even if Biden hated it, he'd have to sign it. So it actually does look like this Congress and this administration will streamline nuclear power plant development and building. That is revolutionary. This is most likely the effect of basically Silicon Valley, basically lobbying Congress to do something as they have to build massive quantities of data centers that are going to use gazillions of electricity, which we do not have the capacity today to produce, and there's no way to produce that electricity using solar and wind. That just ain't happening. So it is pretty exciting. It is pretty exciting to see that happening. Let me also add that also on the side of good news. I keep telling you about these discoveries all over the world of all kinds of rare metals, all kind of metals that everybody assumes that China has a almost monopoly over, or you can only get out of Africa, and the Chinese have cornered the market there. And it turns out that once human beings develop a real need for something, a real need in the sense that there's real profits to be made by discovering, by finding new resources, somehow these resources come into being. Somehow they find them. It's called capitalism. It's called the profit motive. The profit motive incentivizes people to actually do this and find them and figure out ways to economically retrieve them. And, this is something Julian Simon, the economist that I've told you a lot about, talked about often, how there were no limited resources. The only limited resource is the human mind. Julian Simon is somebody you should definitely read. The Ultimate Resource is an Ultimate Resource, 2 of his books. Anyway, a new find. And almost every week when we do this news, there's a new find regarding new materials that are discovered. So here, there's a find off the shores of Japan in a relatively remote island, about 1,900 kilometers from Tokyo. They found it in the water. It's made of iron and manganese oxides. The nodules that they brought up from the ground have 20% manganese and up to 1% cobalt and nickel. Cobalt and nickel, of course, and manganese are essential for batteries that are essential for electric vehicles. They estimate that there's 75 years worth of these materials for domestic Japanese use and consumption. Of course, Japan, given this, could become a major supplier, major processor of these materials, and as a consequence, manganese. Yes, manganese. Sorry, manganese. Yes, I can't read, it turns out. But the manganese, that is the other manganese, cobalt, and nickel. This will bolster the Japanese auto industry. Pretty cool. And I told you about another discovery, this one of rare earth materials in Norway. I mean, it's just every week there's a new discovery like this. And it just shows human ingenuity, profit motive, how it focuses the mind, how it drives discovery, how there's no such thing as scarcity. All there is a scarcity of is brains and freedom. The only scarce things in the world are brains and freedom, basically. All right, that is the news for June 22nd, 2024. All right. So, all right, we are going to talk in a minute about an essay by Niall Fergusson called "We're All Soviets Now." We're going to cover that essay in, some detail. I don't know how much. We'll see if you guys get sick of this or not. But it is an essay in the Free Press. Niall Fergusson is now a regular columnist at the Free Press. He'll do, I think, twice a week columns there. So he's left his regular post, I guess, where he was writing. He was writing somewhere else, and I don't know where he left. But anyway, he's now on at the Free Press and writing for Barry Weiss. Niall Fergusson is one of the leading thinkers, I'd say, on the, I don't know what you'd call it, certainly on the right, one of the leading thinkers of conservatism, to the extent there is such a thing. He is famously also married to Ayn Rand, which I think explains a lot of the unfortunate decisions Ayn Rand has made recently about religion. Niall Fergusson has written many, many books on many, many different topics, some of them good, some of them not so good. But he's an interesting guy, and he wrote this thing about, is the United States the new Soviet Union? So we'll get to that. Let me just, before that, a few announcements, a few things. One, well, let me just tell you first, I just came back from OCON. OCON was terrific. Thank you guys for, a lot of you were there. It was great meeting you. None of you actually, none of the people in the chat actually beat me at poker. So there's always next year for you to try again. But it is true that Robbie Segler, I think for the second time in 4 years, basically knocked me out of the final table. I was at the final table again, I always make it to the final table somehow. Who won? The person who won is Steve from New Jersey. Steve from New Jersey won. So if anybody knows what his family name is, you can publish it here in the chat. I can't remember what his family name was. Ryan was there. Ryan was at the final table. Ryan lasted longer than I did. But I think he lasted longer than I did. I can't remember. Anyway, it was a good game. I enjoyed it. We all have fun. I think we all had fun. But it seems like he did outlast me, but he didn't kick me out, and he wasn't the one who kicked me out. And I did make it to final table for, I don't know, the fourth year, I think, 3 out of 4 years, something like that. I can't remember anymore. But for somebody who plays poker basically once a year at OCON, that's not bad. That's not bad. But Ryan has to admit, it was a lot of fun. Everybody had a good time. There was a lot of banter. My method for getting to the final table continues. I basically tell stories and harass everybody. And I don't know. I think what it does, it distracts the good players. And, they basically don't play up to their potential. And they allow me to squeeze through into the final table. So it was just fun. What can I say? And I think everybody there had a blast. A lot of people who had were dropped off of the various tables ultimately all stood around the final table, and everybody was cheering, and it was a lot of fun. There's no such thing as cheating at poker. Other than pulling out new cards. But the whole point of poker is to do whatever you can to distract, to lie, to deceive, to get people to not be as thoughtful and as statistically minded as they would otherwise in normal times be. Yeah. All right, let's see. What do we want to do? So that was one. Whoops, I don't want to do that. One second. So I want to remind you of that. I want to remind you that Alex Epstein is a sponsor of this show. His Substack is basically his talking points. You should all be subscribers to Alex Epstein's talking points. So I encourage everybody to subscribe. You can also get access to Alex Epstein AI, which was trained on Alex. I understand they're still trying to get rid of all Alex's what do you call it? When the AI goes nuts. But I understand that Alex AI does a good job. So you should subscribe to Alex AI. It's pretty cool that you can ask a question, and when you probably get hallucinations, not that often, but there is. So follow Alex Epstein, alexepstein.substack.com, alexepstein.substack.com. Okay, the Institute, the Ayn Rand Institute, is also a sponsor of the Yaron Brook Show. The Institute right now is promoting their Independence Day themed live online event, which is happening on July 2nd. So 2 days before Independence Day, there will be a online live event where they will be discussing the sense in which Atlas Shrugged is for the future. Atlas Shrugged should be considered America's second Declaration of Independence. It is what completes the original Declaration of Independence. So they'll be discussing the importance of the Declaration, the extent to which it is a real revolution, a real moral revolution, and to the extent to which Atlas Shrugged completes that moral revolution, and therefore should be in a sense, the guide to a future America. So you can go to aynrand.org/start here, aynrand.org/start here to join. There'll be a link there, and you can join the live stream, register in advance, and it should be a lot of fun, and it should be interesting. All right, let me also remind you, important given where we are right now, and given that you guys I'm sure have saved up over the last 2 weeks, given how few shows we've had, that this show is made possible from contributions from people like you. I couldn't be doing it without your contributions that support the research, the time, the expenses, everything involved with the Yaron Brook Show. We have targets for every one of these shows. These targets are calibrated to basically providing enough revenue to keep the show going and to keep the show growing so that I can invest money in marketing of the show. So please consider doing a sticker. Consider asking a question using a super chat. I do try to answer all the super chats, so please do that. But you can do a sticker without asking a question, and that is available. That is also available through the super chat feature down there. You can also gift memberships. That's kind of a cool way to support the Yaron Brook Show by gifting memberships. I think I've gifted all the memberships I can. For the month. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true. But you can gift memberships using the super chat, and support the show at the same time. And it's a great way. It's a great way to do it. Finally, I'll also remind you that there is that OCON 2025 is going to be in Boston. You can join us. It'll be over the 4th of July weekend. I think it's on the 1st to the 5th of July. Please join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. 4th of July in Boston is a unique experience. And Scott has just announced on the chat he's not coming, which should be ample motivation for you to actually come. You know, one of the great things about OCON is there are not a lot of Scots there, and there are not a lot of, it's become super sane. I mean, the objectivists who come to OCON, I mean, you guys who attended OCON can testify to this, just a lot of really, really cool, great people attending OCON these days. So please come to Boston, great city. I wouldn't live there, but summer, it's a little hot, but it'll be great. And there's a massive and amazing, there's amazing history in Boston. So try to come a few days early. Go to Lexington, Concord. Get your dose of American history. The American Revolution was started here ultimately, and it is a great place to celebrate the 4th of July. I do promise, I think, that I will do a positive talk next year. My talk this year was quite negative, but it reflects my actual views. And but I'm hoping my talk will be up soon. It was about the state of American politics. I don't think anything I said will be dramatically new to you guys, but I do think it was put in a package that was quite valuable. You know, Evan said, so many people at OCON with inspiring life stories. Some of them are ARI employees, absolutely. And a lot of the stories have to do with the Yaron Brook show, bringing people to objectivism. So so many people came up to me with those stories. It's just amazing. Please keep doing it. If you have a story about how the Yaron Brook show changed your life, please let me know. So yes, sign up for 2025. I will be working on a discount for YBS. So you might want to wait a little bit. I know there's a 50% discount right now for people who attended OCON. I will be working on a YBS for everybody, for all YBS listeners. I'll let you know as soon as we have that. Unfortunately, the conference will be just after the Boston Celtics win their second championship in a row next year. You know, the finals are all in June. By the time we have the conference, that'll be over, so I won't be able to go see a Celtics game, but I will be able to go see the Garden and see the 18th and 19th banner hanging from the rafters. That'll be fun. All right, we've had a bunch of stickers which I have not thanked, and I apologize. God, I need to have some way to capture all those because they disappear on my chat. But I can thank Gail. Thank you, Gail, because that's more recent. And I can thank Wes, $50. Really appreciate that, Wes. Thank you. And Henrik from Norway, and Kirill. Well, Kirill's actually a question, so we'll get to that in a little bit. That's from the Czech Republic. Let's see. Any other announcements we need to make? We've done OCON. We've done all the people who kind of sponsors of the show. I've asked you to support the show financially, which you should be doing right now. We got a lot of people watching. A sticker, $5 sticker, $2 sticker, anything like that you can do. Please do that. Apollo Zeus just gifted a membership. Thank you, Apollo. That's a great way, without asking a question and without doing a sticker with silly, not silly, but nice emojis, to actually support the show and help somebody. You know, Apollo just gave a membership to Matthew Strauss. So Matthew now is a member. Thank you, guys. All right. Let's talk about this essay by Niall Fergusson. As I said, Niall Fergusson has been considered a rising star on the conservative circles. He has degrees, 2 degrees, I think, from Oxford. He has taught at Oxford and Cambridge. He's one of the most erudite people out there. He is, has an extensive knowledge of history. He's an historian. He's got a British accent, which just raises anybody's IQ by at least 20 points. It's not just any British accent. It's one of those, like, where it's a sophisticated British accent. Thank you, John. Another $50. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you. We're chipping away at the goal. There's still a way to go, but we are chipping away, which is essential. So thank you. Let's see. So Now, Fergusson has written this essay about Cold War II. He has been arguing that we have been in a Cold War with China for a long time. He's probably the first public intellectual to really declare that we are in a second Cold War and equate the Cold War that we're in with China with the Cold War that we had with the Soviet Union. We'll talk about a Cold War 2.0 at a different occasion. I think this is way overstated, and I think part of the problem is that I don't think now Fergusson understands China. I'll just give you one example. For example, he writes in this essay that was published this week in the Free Press. He says China is clearly not only an ideological rival, firmly committed to Marxist, Leninist, and one-party rule. It's just not true. It's just not true. China is not committed to Marxist, Leninist. China is not a Marxist country. China is an authoritarian state committed to Chinese ideals. China is much more of a nationalist, authoritarian, imperialistic state from the Chinese empire than it is a Marxist-Leninist state. I mean, it's doubtful that Mao Zedong himself read very much Marx and Lenin. Never mind Xi and Deng and all these others who are basically engaged in, make America. I mean, Chinese agenda is very simple. This is why I think Donald Trump relates so much to Xi. Xi's agenda is very simple: make China great again. And Xi is now referring to Mao's period, because during Mao's period, Xi knows very well that China was very poor and very weak. Xi is referring to China's, history as an empire. Xi is referring to China 200-300 years ago. And Xi's whole focus, as was Deng's, as is most of the modern Chinese leadership, its whole focus is on Chinese greatness. And its whole orientation is towards Chinese philosophy and Chinese history. Scott McDonald, who I had on the show a while ago, is an expert on China. He served in the military. As part of his service in the military, he was was responsible for analyzing China, knows Taiwan inside out, knows China inside out in terms of and is clear that what really drives them, yes, they use the facade, particularly for their people, because they are the Chinese Communist Party after all. So they have to justify what they do in Leninist Marxist terms, but they don't care. They don't care. Right. Now, now Fergusson is saying, okay, so they're committed. Not only are they firmly an ideological rival, they are, but not the kind of ideology that Niall thinks. They're also a technological competitor, the only one the U.S. confronts in fields such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing. And that is true. Certainly the Russians are nowhere close to the Chinese in any of these fields. And he says it's also a military rival, I would argue, the only military rival we have, with a navy that is already larger than ours and a nuclear arsenal that is catching up fast. And it is a geopolitical rival asserting itself not only in the Indo-Pacific, but also through proxies in Eastern Europe and elsewhere, i.e. through Russia in Eastern Europe. So China is the enemy. China is the party that we're engaged in within a Cold War. But here's the thing. As now Fergusson looks at America, he says the real difference is that it might be the case that it is the United States that is playing the part of the Soviet Union, and China, in a sense, is playing the part of the United States. Now, this is such an outrageous statement that he better have the goods to back it up. I mean, let's remember who the Soviet Union was. The Soviet Union was indeed a empire dedicated to to socialism, dedicated to communism. The Soviet Union was completely and utterly bankrupt. It was dirt poor, in spite of what the CIA told us in the 1970s. The Soviet Union was active in slaughtering, murdering its political opponents within. And even in the post-Stalin era, dissidents were often sent to Siberia, and many, many of them died. If you have ever read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's descriptions of the gulags and what was going on in the gulags was not under Stalin. This was post-Stalin. So the Soviet Union represented the worst type of authoritarianism possible. No property rights, no free speech, no rights at all. A complete and utter authoritarian system. And it was, complete disaster. Now, what does Niall Fergusson focus on? So, a comparison between the Soviet Union of the 60s and 70s and maybe 80s and the United States of today, man, that is a reach. So, what does Fergusson actually focus on? He says Soviet system squandered resources and all but guaranteed shortages of consumer goods. The Soviet healthcare system was crippled by dilapidated hospitals and chronic shortages of equipment. There was grinding poverty, hunger, and child labor. Now, notice, he doesn't mention freedom. He doesn't mention one-party rule. He doesn't mention the gulags. He doesn't mention free speech. He mentions some economic facts. Now, to what extent do those economic facts map onto America? Well, Fergusson claims that in America today, quote, such conditions exist only in the bottom quintile of the economic distribution, though the extent to which they do exist is truly appalling. Does anybody, even in the bottom quintile of America in poverty, really have a shortage in consumer goods? Are consumer goods not there? Now, maybe they can't afford a lot of them, but can they afford bread? Yes. Were there bread shortages in the Soviet Union? Yes. Can you compare the shortages in America, even for the bottom quintile, to the shortages of the Soviet system? No. No. The Soviet healthcare system was crippled and dilapidated. Bottom quintile get Medicaid. Not great, but it's insurance. Do they really have the same dilapidated healthcare system? No innovation, no drugs, no technology, nothing. No cancer treatment, nothing available to them because they're poor in America. Is that really a fair comparison? No. Is there a shortage of equipment in American hospitals? No. I mean, it could be better, but not as compared to the Soviet Union. And yes, poor people in America can't afford it, but they get Medicaid. The United States redistributes on a massive scale. Indeed, according to work I've seen, redistribution of wealth, welfare in all its different capacities, from Medicare to food stamps to welfare checks to everything else, unemployment insurance and everything, added together, gives most poor people who can figure out how to work the welfare state an income that is almost the same as a lower middle class income. Indeed, one of the horrors of American society is the fact that if you're lower middle class and working, you often achieve the same standard of living of somebody on welfare. We talked about this when that song came out. You remember that song? What was that song, that country song that all the right freaked out about and was super supportive until they discovered the guy wasn't really one of theirs, and then they kind of turned against him. But for a while, he was like the biggest hit in the world. And this idea of the frustration of the lower middle class about the fact that welfare recipients have an income equivalent to theirs. So is it really that bad in the bottom quintile? Now, it is true that infant mortality in the late Soviet Union was around 25 per 1,000, and in the United States, for a single mother in the Mississippi Delta, you're really searching, you're really analyzing the data. So for a single mother in the Mississippi Delta or in the Appalachia, It's 13,000. So 13,000 is half of what it was in the Soviet Union. That is in the lowest of the lowest, and in particular places. Maybe one reason we should have legalized abortion in Appalachia and the Mississippi Delta, so that we don't get so much of the tragedy and the heartache and the horror of infant mortality. But also, it is interesting that single motherhood is in decline, particularly teenage pregnancies are massively in decline in the United States over the last 20 years. God forbid a conservative actually give us those statistics and remind us that the number of single mothers, particularly in their teens, in the Mississippi Delta and the Appalachian, is declining dramatically, and things are getting better. Better? No, you're not allowed to say that. Better for those people over the last 10, 15 years, 20 years. So you're taking a subcategory, and then emphasizing it as if that's growing, or as if it's significant, as if it's meaningful, and it's still half of the entire Soviet Union. I'm not sure what the point is exactly. But let's look closer. Now, Fergusson says that's not enough. Right? Problem with the Soviet Union, he says, is they had a constant deficit. Constant deficit. They spent money they didn't have. Well, isn't that the case of the United States? We have a constant deficit. U.S. deficit forecast by the Congressional Budget Office is going to exceed 5% of GDP and rise to 8.5% of GDP by 2054. And of course, the central government now is involved in decision-making. Look at the CHIP Act and I wonder, I'm pretty sure now Fergusson is not against the CHIP Act. So he's not against centralized decision-making for investment in the name of industrial policy if it supports his thesis around Cold War II. But yes, the Biden administration is involved in industrial policy. Again, to compare this to the Soviet Union? Really? The reality is that the United States can fix its budget deficit quite easily. Just some liberalizing of the U.S. economy, just some deregulation, energizing kind of the spirit of entrepreneurship in this country. And that government deficit will shrink dramatically. There's still a lot of entrepreneurs, flexibility, and in this economy, there's still a lot of innovation. There's still a lot of... Let's ignore all that. Let's be really dark. Let's be really pessimistic. Let's really only focus on the fact that we have a deficit and the Soviet Union have a deficit, and ignore everything else. The deficit in the Soviet Union involved a complete structural collapse in order to solve the Soviet Union's economic problems. That's actually not necessary yet in the United States. I wish now Fergusson and the rest of the conservatives and people on the right were advocating for the kind of economic policies that would lead to a robust, thriving, growing economy. But no, they'd rather muse about how horrific America is, how almost like the Soviet Union it is. It is a disaster, according to now Fergusson. That's not good, but the Soviet Union? Now, what about our military? We're told, the mightiest, strongest, best military in the world, in human history. I've said that on this show. Niall disagrees. We have a military that's simultaneously expensive and unequal to the task it confronts. Right? We can't win a war in Afghanistan. Oh, that reminds me. USSR didn't win a war in Afghanistan. Now says it's because, our military force is only strong on paper. The fact is that in reality, we cannot win. We cannot fight. We don't have the right equipment. We don't have the right tools. We don't have the right people. We just cannot fight. We lack modern equipment. We don't train people enough. We have a lack of maintenance funding. And our adversaries all know this. Now, there is a lot of truth to that. However, the real problem with the American military is not lack of equipment, lack of training, or lack of maintenance. The real problem with the American military is not the fact that we do not have modern equipment. Indeed, our equipment is generations ahead of our rivals, including the Chinese. Our problem is we don't know how to win, because we don't know how to deploy those resources, and we never deploy them to win. We have not deployed the resources to win. It's not a lack of technology. It's not a lack of equipment. It's not a lack of any of these things. It's a lack of will. It's a lack of morality. It's a lack of ethics. It's a lack of morality of war. How to win a war. Read my Just War Theory versus America essay. We don't not spend enough on military. We probably spend too much on military. We don't spend it effectively because we can't use it. We have a bad philosophy that guides our use. The problem is not money. The problem is not weapons. The problem is philosophical. And the reality is, and we're seeing that on the battlefield of Ukraine, that Russia, with a much bigger army, with much more ammunition, with greater numbers and of troops and equipment and everything, cannot beat a scrappy, small, untrained, lacking in equipment Ukrainian military. I mean, they make advances, but they're not beating them. They're not losing either. They're fighting them to a draw. And that's Ukraine. That's pretty pathetic. In an all-out war, where they are not constrained by rules of engagement. They are not constrained by what's taught in West Point, just war theory. Russians certainly are not constrained by any ideas about morality in war. And yet they can't win. So our enemies do not have better militaries, more advanced militaries, more anything. What we don't have is the will. That's a problem. But that doesn't equate us to the Soviet Union. It maybe equates us to Rome towards its decline, or equate us to, I don't know, maybe it doesn't equate it to anybody. Maybe it's a new phenomena of a rotten philosophy eating away at a great civilization. Actually, that's Rome. And the rotten philosophy is similar. It's a derivative of Christianity. And this is a conservative who is missing the trees and missing the forest. He says the Soviet Union had senile, old leaders. Brezhnev, Andropov, Chernikov. So do we. Oh, that's a fundamental. There you go. That makes us the Soviet Union. And then in the Soviet Union, they were very cynical about all their institutions. So are we. I mean, think about that. God. Soviet Union institutions were authoritarian, not authoritarian, totalitarian. Yes, we're cynical. You don't think there's a difference in kind between our cynicism and theirs? Now, it is true. America is a country in decline. It is true that we risk being beaten by the communists. And I'm going to stop. You can find this essay if you want to read the rest of it. You can find this essay on Free Press. It's just too ridiculous. It is true that we risk losing to the Chinese. But it is not because of the stats that we get from now Fergusson. And it is not because of the fact of a weak military or a weak economy. I mean, he goes on to say, look at the fentanyl epidemic. It's the equivalent of the alcohol epidemic in the Soviet Union, where everybody died from alcohol poisoning. And then he goes into, the left in America. Of course, it had to go there. It was equivalent to the craziness of the Soviet Union. And he just draws these artificial, ridiculous parallels. You can talk about American decline without comparing us to the Soviet Union. You can talk about American decline and try to pinpoint its origins. And if your conclusion is Americans in decline because of statism, Americans in decline because we're moving away from the principles of capitalism and individual rights, I'm all with you. But there's no conclusion like that. There's no summing up. There's just, we look like the Soviet Union. because we're cynical like the Soviet Union was. And as a consequence, we're probably going to lose Cold War II. Now, it's interesting, because why didn't he run the same stats on China? China has massive deficits. Those are increasing because China's in real economic problems right now. The Xi just fired a huge number of generals because there's massive corruption in the Chinese military, and a lot of those super duper weapons that they built, maybe they're not as good as they claim, because maybe a lot of these generals siphoned off the money and put it in their own pockets. So, and you could go on. Do you think the Chinese are not cynical about their institutions? The Chinese have a phenomenon called lying down, which where young people refuse to work. They lie down. They don't go to work. They refuse to work. They live off their parents, or they find other ways, but they don't work. There's a massive amount of cynicism. The idea that, America is beyond redemption, that China is the future. I mean, it's possible. But then you'd have to really identify the cause, and the cause is philosophical. And the cause is partially nihilist faults. The cause is that the conservatives cannot mount any kind of significant opposition that is non-statist to the left. The cause is growing statism on both left and right. The cause is the rejection of reason, Ayn Rand is part of that, right, by the right, embrace of religion on the right, in response to the negation of reason by the left. So the left becomes more statist, the right matches them. The left becomes more unreasonable, that is, rejects reason, the right matches them. The left is crazy altruism, the right matches them. That is why we're in trouble. That is why we might lose the Cold War. Not because of similarities to the Soviet Union that are all superficial, instead of looking at ideas. Now, it is true that as we become more statist, we rely more on government, we become more collectivist, we become more altruistic. In that sense, we become more like the Soviet Union. But then deal with the ideas. Don't kind of convolute the stats and come up with bogus kind of parallels. It was a very, very, very disappointing article from Niall Fergusson, who I think is smarter than that. But it reflects kind of the, I don't know, there's some sense in which the right has become mindless. The right can't really see the drivers, can't really see the principles. And it's become unbelievably dark, darker than I am about America. They really are detached from reality. And shallow. Shallow, that's the best way to think about it, Andrew. They're shallow. And this is the best, I think, some of the best people on the right. And part of the shallowness comes from, and part of the only seeing darkness comes from, this attitude of, well, I mean, the left is so horrible, then everything must be horrible. Everything is about the left. And by doing so, they don't introspect about the fact that they are to a large extent responsible. Right? They're to a large extent responsible. Which is sad. Which is sad. Because again, this is a major intellectual of the right, certainly one of the more well-spoken and published writers on the right, and all they can see is the darkness. All they can see is is somehow, all this bad stuff, and they have no solution for it. No solution for it. Because suddenly, I don't think even now Fergusson thinks that Donald Trump is the solution. He's a supporter, but I don't think he sees that as a solution. But what is the solution? What are the values necessary to solve this problem? It's all the same old. They're conservatives. So the solution is just hearkening back to whenever they think was best. Certainly not to the founding fathers. That would be hearkening back to principles, and we can't do that. So, God, the Soviet Union, we've got to that point where the right is comparing the United States to the Soviet Union. I mean, I don't know. I just gave an incredibly pessimistic talk at OCON, and I feel like, I'm the optimist on the block. Because I don't think we're at the level of the Soviet Union for a lot of different reasons. And I think that overplaying your hand in terms of the darkness, I mean, you know what this is. I get what this is. It's a Flight 93 type essay, right? Do you remember the Flight 93? I've talked about this many times. And I talked about it when it was actually published in 2016. Flight 93, at the time was written anonymously. Right now, the name of the guy who wrote it slips my mind, but at the time it was anonymous. And basically, Flight 93 is the flight, the fourth hijacked flight on 9/11, where the passengers made this calculation. Basically, they were dead, right? Because they had realized by this point that this plane was going to fly into the White House or something. They were all gonna die. So they stormed the cockpit with the idea that worst case scenario, they would die anyway, and best case scenario, they can take control of the plane. That's the attitude of Flight 93. Things are so bad in America, that we need to rush the cockpit. We're dead anyway. The Chinese are taking us over anyway. So we might as well rush the cockpit. And what does rushing the cockpit look like? What does rushing the cockpit look like in 2024? It looks like voting for Trump and using government to suppress the impact, the horrific impact of the left. That's what it looks like. That's rushing the cockpit. We're probably going to die anyway. It's January 6th, yeah. We're probably going to die anyway, but at least we have a shot somehow. And that's what this kind of thinking leads you to. Yeah, to hell with freedom. What we need is whatever it takes to get rid of the left, because they're destroying this country, without recognizing the fact that much of this country was destroyed by the right as well as the left. And that the solutions the right has, 136% tariffs, are just as bad as what the left is offering us. All right, on that wonderful note, yeah, it's nihilism of the left and nihilism of the right. The nihilism of the right is wrapped in this facade of, we're just doing it to save the world. It's desperation, and the times require it because the times are desperate. But the result, actions, same thing. All right, let's go for your questions. And just to remind you that we are a listener-supported show. All of you here on the Super Chat, a sticker, even $1, $2, $5, $10, those add up, and they can really help fund this show and keep the show going. Just remember also value for value. You get a value by listening to the show. You can provide. By the way, a few of you, thank you to those of you who handed me cash at OCON as your annual support for the Yaron Brook Show. I really, really, really appreciate that. Thank you. One of you, and God, the name slips me. Maybe you can send me an email and remind me who you are. Gave me, the money to buy more chips at the poker table. So that was very, very helpful. It allowed me to last to get to the final table. All right, Ryan says, Ryan was very active on the poker table the other day. All right, I found Fergusson's opinion piece to have good parts, but overall, a moral equivalency was a bit ridiculous. America is still so far from Soviet Russia. If you objectively assess, what is the motive then? Again, the motive I just described. The motive is to make you feel like the world's going to end, so you're available, you're open, you're receptible to dramatic, radical, crazy stuff from the right. Right? So, you know, they're trying to set the groundwork for doing something like January 6th in order to save the country from losing. That's the motive. And yes, some of the things he said were true, in the sense that, yeah, there are a lot of problems in America. His whole analysis, by the way, of deaths of despair is, for a variety of reasons, wrong. It's dated. The data does not support his assertions. The data does not support the original paper on deaths of despair. I'll do a show on that, because I did do a show a few years ago about deaths of despair. It looks like the paper, and I was wrong back then, that it's a more nuanced issue. It's not just whites, middle class, working class men. The death of despair is a much wider phenomena and cannot be explained in the kind of terms that the original authors tried to explain it. And I think Fergusson is wrong even on that. But yeah, our military could be better. Our technology could be better. Everything in this country could be better. It's easy to make a list of all the things that are wrong. But to compare us to the Soviet Union and moral equivalency is absurd and ridiculous, and again, only serves to set us up for authoritarianism from the right. And that is the purpose. I truly believe that is the purpose. Andrew, as we enter a new technological revolution of AI, what do you think are some main intellectual forces that threaten text development and which must be challenged so as to facilitate human flourishing? All right, I'm going to get to that. Let me just, before I forget or before this jumps out, I'm going to just thank Gail and thank Apollo for the membership and thank John, $50, really appreciate that. Henrik, thank you. Volta, thank you. These are all stickers, guys. You can do stickers too. 1, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, $500 stickers, all welcome. Jeremy did 5 gifted memberships. Thank you, Jeremy. Really appreciate it. Jeremy told me at OCON how much he likes gifting memberships as a way of supporting the show. Really appreciate that. Henrik, again, that's, I think, the 3rd from Henrik. All right, so what are the intellectual forces that threaten text development? Well, I mean, so many of them, I'd say anti-human, movements that are associated with AI is going to kill us all. A lack of recognition of what makes human beings human, and a lack of understanding of human consciousness and of free will is part of that. I think the degrowth movement on the left, which believes that economic growth is bad and we should stop economic growth and actually not just slow it down, but reverse it. So an anti-technology Luddite mentality. The other mentality is a Luddite mentality. I think you've got that both on the right and on the left, which is AI is going to take our jobs. AI is going to destroy the economy. AI will destroy the working class. We have to protect the working class by destroying AI. So that's both on left and right, kind of a Luddite anti-tech mentality. But really what you're asking is all the main intellectual forces alive today, statist right and statist left, altruism, unreason, the negation of reason, they're all working against AI. They're all working against technology. They're all working against economic progress. All of them. Kiro, I was on Reddit and there was a post about how Atlas Shrugged was overrated. The number of comments that completely misrepresented the book and Ayn Rand in general was infuriating. A lot of Bioshock references. I almost lost sleep over this. Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. People read the book or they don't read the book, but it's got cultural cachet. They don't understand it. They misrepresent it. Again, we live in a culture where most of the voices are negative voices. Most of the people are jumping up to slam something, to ridicule it, to put it down, And there are very few voices to celebrate and to congratulate and to draw in the positives. God, I asked an audience yesterday of not young people, older people. I asked them, how many people in the world today live on $2 a day or less? One guy said 90%. Others said 80. Another person said 50. The best was somebody who said 20%. The real number is 8. But it's, and these are all Republicans. These are all, Republicans, many of them Trump supporters. The perception of life sucks and everything is horrible and the world is going to hell and there's no hope is dominant out there, particularly on the right. And I think that negativity and darkness affects the way people read Atlas Shrugged and the way they process Atlas Shrugged. And it's a divorcement from reality. Stephen, is it true that Donald Trump wants to give green cards to all immigrants who are hired for a job? It seems too good to be true, especially for Trump. I haven't seen that. I'd be shocked if it was true, but I hope it is, because I think that, as I said, that is the best plan ever, and exactly how you implement it and how you do it. I've said that immigration should be a job-based program. Neb Simpson says it's true. I want to see the details of what he actually said and in what context and how he said it. I'd be surprised if that's it, if it's unconditional in terms of that. And what does it mean, hired to be a job? Can you be hired from overseas? I mean, if that is his policy, if his policy is now unlimited immigration of anybody who can get a job, we'll give them green cards, that is huge. And that would be a major, major shift in the political landscape. It'll be a major, major shift in the Republican politics, a major shift for Trump. I'll watch the interview and see what he actually says. But if Trump actually holds that view and can sustain that view, that is a game changer, I think, in American politics. But I have major reservations about whether he can sustain that. Oh, that's green cards for graduates of American universities. Okay, that's narrower. It's still good, but it's nowhere near as good as how I read it originally, right? So all immigrants, it said green cards to all immigrants. That's what Stephen Hoppe says. Yeah, I mean, that is a proposal I actually made 10 years ago. There were a bunch of Wall Street Journal articles during that period that supported that. I think I made it before the Wall Street Journal articles came out, so I don't know if I can't remember the process, but it's something I supported. It's a no-brainer. It's the easiest thing in the world. Anybody who graduates from an American university, no matter where they're from, particularly if they're from STEM, but any degree, should get a green card. But even that, I think, I doubt Donald Trump would actually stick to that. Charlie says, hey, Yaron, have you heard of Hoppe's argumentation ethics? It seems to have replaced the basic natural rights argument in libertarian circles. It seems geared to axiomatize the NAP, forgoing rights altogether. Yes, I mean, I haven't studied it, but I've seen just some representations of the augmentation argument. It does seem like it's a way, yes, exactly that, to basically bring in kind of NAP as an axiomatic idea. It cannot be challenged, and once you have that, and it's based on, I think, both Rothbard's ideas as well of, what do you call it? You own your body, and so it's ownership and things like that. I'm not impressed. It's completely rationalistic, detached from reality, and pretty mediocre, if not bad, just bad philosophically. But happy to look more into it and give you a more thorough critique of it. Ryan, what is one place you can confidently lie while surrounded by objectivist intellectuals? At the poker table with Yaron and others at OCON. So fun. Yes, the one place you can confidently lie is at the poker table, even if I'm present. I allow lying in poker. Thomas, I read The Fountainhead and am confused by Dominique. I thought she was nihilistic, but now I think she was transitioning from selfless to selfish thoughts. Yeah, I mean, she's basically a transitioning character. She is not a nihilist in the sense that, she can value, but she's on borderline nihilistic. She's certainly got those tendencies. And she's certainly confused, and she's certainly struggling with self-interested ideas. And I don't know that she's selfless. I don't think she's selfless. What I do think is that there's a certain sense in which she's very second-handed. She is offended by the fact that people who are not worthy get to, I don't know, see a beautiful sculpture. So she'd rather destroy the sculpture than have people who are unworthy of seeing it see it. But that doesn't deny her own pleasure and own excitement in seeing the sculpture, for example. So she's a valuer who cannot tolerate the fact that there are people out there who are unworthy and who can still survive. She wants to destroy Rourke, not for the sake of destruction, which was what nihilism is. So she's not a nihilist at all. But for the sake of denying other people his greatness. And to prevent him from suffering. So she's malevolent. She's got a dark view of the universe. But she's never selfless. Never selfless. And she's never nihilistic. She's destructive. But destructive for a purpose. A bad purpose. A second-handed purpose. A purpose that places what other people think too highly. A purpose that is too much based on malevolence, on the inability of the good to achieve anything in life. And that's what needs to be taken away from her. But she is a confusing character. At some point, we should do a longer segment on Dominique where we can get into more detail. Shozbot, thank you for the support. Really, really appreciate it. We're like $113 short of our 2-hour goal, which is $500. So, maybe I'll shift the goal to $500. If anybody can help us get there, it would be greatly appreciated. Get us back on track from a raising money for the show perspective. And I'm going to try to finish all these Super Chat questions by 5 o'clock. So it'll be 2 hours. So let's try to raise another $113 in the next 10 minutes. If you were forced to live with an anti-Semite on a desert island and your choices were a neo-Nazi, a Bolshevik, a Black Power Afrocentrist, or a Palestinian, which one would you choose and why? God, I don't know. It wouldn't be a neo-Nazi for sure. It wouldn't be a real believing Bolshevik. So it's between the Black Power Afrocentrist and a Palestinian. Probably go with a Black Power Afrocentrist because he's probably the most ignorant of all of them. It's probably the most primitive of all the ideologies, and therefore probably the one that is most easy to reverse. I mean, you can't talk to a neo-Nazi. You can't change the mind of a Bolshevik in this day and age. But, a Palestinian, I don't know. So Palestinian and Afrocentrist probably, it's not a very good question. But that would be the best I can do. Evan, chipping away at it. Thank you, Evan. Shozbot, you've sponsored many Star Trek reviews in 2022, but I can't find a YBS review of Star Wars Season 2, Episode 9, Measure of a Man. Did you sponsor it? If so, what date? Okay, anybody can find the episode where I reviewed Measure of a Man. Please let Evan know. Evans wants to sponsor that one. I've already done the review, but I don't know exactly where it is. So if you know where it was, please let Evan know. Thank you, Evan. Neocon, Candace is living proof of a famous saying, if you give success to stupid people, it makes you even more stupid. I think that's right. Although it's not just stupidity. It's more than that. There's a certain immorality involved as well. Robert says, joined late. Hope OCON 2024 was awesome. It was. Already registered for OCON 2025. Great. See you all there. Register now, friends. 50% discount ends after Monday. Hey, it ends after Monday. Don't forget to register to OCON 2025. Or you just have to go to just Google search OCON 2025. You get a 50%. I don't think the YBS discount in the future will be as big as a 50% discount. So now's your chance. Register before Monday, 50% off. Wow, that's very cool. Andrew, exciting news about Austin Objectivist building being built. Any estimate timeline for construction? So we did announce during OCON that we are going to be building an Ayn Rand center, museum, library, headquarters, activities, archives, everything. It will be a beautiful building. The video will be uploaded at some point. You'll be able to see pictures of it. We have architectural design. It will be an amazing structure. The Ayn Rand Institute will be moving there. We will also have the university moving there. We'll have campus there. We'll be teaching live classes there. We'll also have an auditorium where we'll have lectures and movies, and we'll have a coffee shop where there'll be salons on philosophy and debates and all kinds of stuff. It is going to be an amazing place that looks awesome. We have already raised a significant amount of money to do it, so enough so that we are now committed to doing this. We're still in the process of raising the rest of the money. It will be in Austin, Texas, a 10-minute walk from the university, adjacent to many of the dorms and facilities for the students, and not far from where a lot of faculty live. So just the pleasure. And the building will have a big quote from Ayn Rand on the facade, so there will be no question about what this is. That'll piss off all those academics living nearby. It will not have residential apartments. It's not big enough anyway, but wouldn't want to have a residential apartments. It's a two-story building, architecturally, I think, stunning, and has this amazing presence, particularly at night. Anyway, if anybody out there would like to support this, currently we're looking for 6- and 7-figure contributions to support this. If you have the ability to support it with 6 or 7 figures, would like to be one of the founding members, one of the founding circle of supporters, and have your name, engraved in the stone in it, please support it. We will be accepting money from smaller contributors once we reach a certain level, but right now we don't have the infrastructure to raise money from smaller contributors. We will at some point. Right now we're looking for 6- and 7-figure donors. 8-figure donors are welcome as well. We do have one of those. We are looking for 8-figure supporters to build this. We have, in terms of timeline, it's construction, and God, you can never commit on construction. But I think if everything goes smoothly, as smoothly as one can predict, I expect the building to be open in 2028. 2028. All right, so yes, I know there are a lot of listeners out there who do have a lot of money, who love Ayn Rand. Wouldn't you love to see a building named after Ayn Rand with that is an architectural statement, and where we have a physical presence in a major place? It'll be at least 20,000 square feet of event space, and and classroom space and exhibit space. And I think it'd be very exciting. It'll be a place that objectivists can come to, people can come to, and learn about Ayn Rand's life and about her philosophy and about her ideas in a variety of different ways: audiovisual exhibits and lectures and courses and classes and salons and everything else. Apollo Zeus, in regard to right-wing theory, is there a difference currently between U.S. and European immigration strategy? I think Europe is being usurped. I don't know what that means, that it's usurped, but I think immigration is a big deal for both places. I think the big difference is that in Europe, immigrants do pose a potential threat because of how many of them are Muslim and how many of them are radical Muslims. And in the United States, immigration does not pose a threat because very few of them are Muslim. And even few of them are radical Muslims. So in Europe, it's a real threat and a real issue and a real problem. And in the United States, it is not. And that is the big issue. But in terms of the angst and the rise of the right as a consequence of immigration, that is common to both places. Both places. All right, Shozbot says, Measure of a Man was reviewed on December 27, 2021. Wow, a long time ago. Video titled Elizabeth Warren versus Elon Musk and Reality, timestamp around 11150. God, Shozbot, what a resource. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Adam, Candace Owens is what you get when owning the left is all you care about. Shapiro made a huge mistake hiring her without doing some vetting. I agree. I never liked her. I always was suspicious of her, even when she was better in her Turning Point USA days. Brownie, who's worse on free trade, tariff policy, Trump or Biden? Well, based on their explicit policies, Trump is much worse, much, much worse. I mean, he would have a universal tariff on every good coming into the United States of at least 10%. He would have 100% tariffs, not just on electric vehicles, but on all goods from China. Much worse. And I think Biden has a basic understanding of economics that is far superior to Trump's on just anything related to trade. Biden's an idiot, but Trump is worse. Trump just knows less about economics and certainly about trade than even Biden, as low as I think my opinion is of Biden. Ryan, OCON 2025 is in Boston. I will be there, and you can join me at poker tournament and at all the events. It is amazing. Ryan had a blast, obviously, and you too can get 50% off, 50% discount by registering before Monday. All right, Andrew says, Tal, it was a great hire to lead AOI. Yes, he was. Apollo, the Lebanon involvement in the war. Hezbollah is involved in, Israel is inching towards war with Hezbollah. That'll involve all of Lebanon. The Lebanese army is too weak to control Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a stronger army than the Lebanese army. It basically controls Lebanon. But there is the potential that if Israel invades Lebanon, that there will be a civil war within Lebanon as the Christian militias fight Hezbollah because they object to Hezbollah's war with Israel. They don't want to go to war. Please talk about Philip Rearden. Is he a parasite? Yes. I mean, he's the definition of a parasite. He lives off of a brother. He produces nothing. He adds no value. And he's a parasite that demands to be fed. He demands it. He demands it on the basis of the morality of altruism. Martin, just registered for OCON 2025. I was the one giving you cash support at the poker tournament. Thank you, Martin. Really, really, really appreciate that. See you all next year in Boston. Yeah, guys, join us in Boston. It will be a blast. And don't forget to register for the poker if you come. Steven says, hi, Yaron. Do you think I was right to ask the Huntington to remove an ugly postmodern from the Blue Boy Gallery? Is that an artistic crime? It is. You are absolutely right. They won't listen to you, but you are absolutely right. It is super, super important that all of us, when we go to these museums and we see them mixing the horrors of modern art with beautiful stuff, that we make our opinion known, that we voice a confident view that what they're doing is a crime and horrific, and it is just, yeah, it's one of the worst things happening in our culture. And it's been going on for 50 years, but certainly it's getting worse. Shally says, honestly, I am fearful for Europe. I'm seeing a lot of rumbling reminiscence of the 1920s, except now everyone is Weimar Germany. I think there's a lot of truth to that. We're not quite there. We're not quite on the precipice, but look at France, look at the rest of Europe. It is, without any question, scary. It is very scary what's going on in Europe. And I told you, I predicted this for Europe, after 9/11. After 9/11 and on, I've been predicting the rise of fascism in Europe to combat the immigration problem. The Islamic problem, really. It's not an immigration problem. It's an Islamist problem. The unwillingness of the West to go to war with Islamists will generate fascism in Europe. That is the outcome. All right. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. We're $49 short. If somebody wants to step in with $50, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, I think I'm going to do a show tomorrow at 3 o'clock as well. There will be a show in Hebrew tomorrow at 12 p.m. East Coast time. My show in Hebrew tomorrow, 12 p.m. East Coast time. Maybe a show at 3 o'clock, maybe not. But anyway, Monday, We'll be back on schedule. I've got Robert Bryce is coming in for an interview tomorrow evening. We'll talk about atomic nuclear energy and other environmental energy-related issues. He is an expert on nuclear energy, so that should be interesting. We can talk about this new bill that Congress passed and other things. We'll also, but there will be, so there'll be 2 shows on Monday, a news show at 1 o'clock, and then a interview show in the evening. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, regular schedule. And maybe there will also be shows on Saturday and Sunday next week. Trying to catch up from missing so many shows during OCON. All right, everybody, thank you. And I will see you all maybe tomorrow. Bye, everybody.